Oikos is Africa is like an NGO that based here in Arusha. And for more than 20 years, they're working on the protection of biodiversity and sustainable use of natural resources as tools to fight poverty and boost community well-being. So we have three priority program areas we're working on. So one is water for people, wildlife and livestock, but then also like climate change adaptation and nature-based solutions for communities. And I'm today here, I would like to present one project that we have started in 2019, and it's like a women-led rangeland restoration in northern Tanzania. So just as a small cutback, like we have ranging here in northern Tanzania, which are supporting huge communities of more than 500,000 pastoralists and more than 4 million herds of livestock. However, they're not only place where like humans and livestock live, but we also have like the wildlife corridors. We have rich areas for wildlife, and it's shared land between livestock and wildlife. So what we learned during the project, we started, as I said, 3 years ago, and we just upscaled it to further 17 villages, which brings a total of 22 villages, is that rangeland restoration is a learning curve. We're still at the starting. It's like 2 steps forwards and 1 step backwards. And what I'm today about to talk about is like not only the successes behind it, but also the challenges and the key messages that we learned so far that I would like to share with everyone in the room. So, as I said, we now have a very strong field team just by learning that's tested these methodologies. And we are working with more than 400 pastoral women in the area from western Kilimanjaro towards Lake Natron and down to Tarangire-Manyara ecosystem. So as we all know, like rangelands have several threats that are going on at the moment. So on the one hand, we have a very strong population increase, which goes aligned with like an increase of livestock numbers. Also infrastructure development and in total less movements. So more people staying in the same areas, which increases the pressure on the rangelands drastically. And that actually leads to like several threats that we can all observe and see now in the rangelands around us. So like we have a big loss of grasses, so like an increase of bare ground. And when we just go outside here for Arusha, we can see it that like more and more areas are actually just bare. And not only during the dry season, like even with a small rain, it's not enough to recover its actual natural health. Another big problem that we observe is like the spread of invasive species. And lastly, like bush encroachment, which also hinders livestock to reach grasses for fodder. So what we can see is a big problem is like we have a loss of rangelands, and invasive species are more and more prevalent concerns for pastoral communities, and one of the really greatest challenges to tackle. And the biggest problem here is actually that we still have a knowledge gap in how to manage invasive species. And until actually a counteract or reaction is taking place when the invasive species are recognized, very often they're already there in like really large numbers, and then it gets even harder to tackle these problems. And I want just to make a small excursus to like when I'm talking about invasive species, because it's something that we really start with, is like, what makes a plant an invasive plant? So it's an organism that's not indigenous or native to a particular area, and it can cause great economic and environmental harm to this new area. So to be invasive, a species must be really easily adapting to like the new environment and counter like the nature species that are there. So very often we can see that you find first a few invasive plants, but then slowly they take over the natural vegetation that's found in the area. And And what we developed like under this project is, for example, like this posters that like shows the major invasive species that are found in the northern Tanzania rangelands. And I'm sure all of you have talked about several years, for example, it's like the second one here is a poster, so it's Patenium, very well known as an invasive species. It's not only on the rangeland, it starts as agricultural land, but it's spreading more and more into the rangelands, into the communities. And yeah, other ones like the Argemonia mexicana, like the Mexican poppy, and so on. So in total, this poster contains like 15 species. That is like distributed to the communities, and we educate people about invasive species and how to do it. So by saying that, we kind of come to like, what are the solutions for rangeland restoration? So what we do is we work with women in the communities, and we provide them with adequate tools and information. So knowledge about problems that can occur, but also like how to assess what is the current status of the rangelands, and then what are appropriate management techniques to deal with this. So what we found out, like part of these management tools what we're doing is on the one hand plant removal, for example, especially talking about invasive plants. But even there, we say only if and when correct. Because what we learned is like, very often it can occur is that when you remove invasive species to the wrong time, for example, when you actually make a bigger disturbance of the topsoil, which leads to a further infestation of other invasive species to the area. So it's something that we learned, it's like, there is no correct way. Like if I say in one area it works, it might actually in another area not work, because it's a very complex ecological system, and these invasive plants are incredible like fighters to like actually like overcome what you try to remove them to actually come back into the areas. Other methodologies we're using for rangeland restoration is like seed traps, so creating like barriers out of bushes and brush. Then plant material to actually like capture seeds that are blown with the wind or so on, to like be coming back into the area, and also like protect them from grazing. Water bonds, which are helping to like keep the water in an area, to stop topsoil erosion, and like to really make sure that there is less erosion channels creating on the rangelands. And some other methodologies. So here we can see the pictures of women working in the restoration area. So the restoration areas are like between 4 hectares up to like 120 acres on communal rangelands in the villages here around. The size completely depends on the community, what they discuss, how much they think they want to start with. We have some communities who started with small areas, they increased, others changed, others decided to reduce the areas to start with smaller ones. So it's a community-based project, so it really depends on what the communities decide which area they want to work on. And yeah, I would like to make some quotations, because I'm feeling that the experience of like the women we're working with are actually showing very well what was going on and what's still going on. So for example, like one rangeland guardian stated like that we share ideas, we help each other. If there's something I don't know, another woman will know. And that shows like this great community, like creating like a women group where women come together and work once, twice a week on like rangeland restoration activities. Does not only mean that they exchanging ideas about like rangeland restoration, but also they are growing as a group and they help each other and they can share knowledge and ideas they have in their community. Another quotation is like, I did not know about the way of removing invasive plants. For me, I used to consider everything called badan, but now I know that there's different types of plants. So there are invasive plants, and we can improve them to improve our environment. So it's again, there is a knowledge transfer taking part by like providing education and trainings on like how to restore rangelands. Another big part of it is, like, as I mentioned before, is not only the restoration work itself, but also the recording and analyzing rangeland health. And we train so-called rangeland assessors who use very simple methodologies, like as shown up here. It's like a stick, a 1 meter stick with some marks on it, to assess, like, on a science-based approach, like rangeland health, which helps them to analyze what is the current status of our rangelands. Are the invasive species starting to spread? And that can be used not only on the small restoration plots, but in the general community rangelands. And that can help grazing committees, but also village leaders, to make decisions on where actually grazing should be happening or not. Another quotation by one of our rangeland guardians is like, sitting by yourself is fine, but if you sit together you can get more ideas, which also shows again like how important it is to work as groups and to provide a platform to exchanging ideas and providing further knowledge. The last one is, we have goals that if we can get grass to grow, we can sell the grass at a good price. This goes very well aligned because part of also the Rangeland Gardens is like a marketplace literacy training. So women are getting trained on, like, very often literate women on basic skills to analyze market situations, like possibilities to earn some income and what are the steps that needs to be done. In general, what we learned from our project work in the last years, it's a very big thing, do no harm. So only do something when you know that it will not harm. And I think that's one of the biggest lessons we learned, because, as I said at the beginning, invasive species, to identify them and then to start taking action about it, sometimes by actually trying to do the right, we at the end do the wrong thing, because we actually increase other invasive species to come in, or moving invasive species during the dry season, which expose them more and more the remaining bare land to, like, soil erosion and winter erosion and other problems. So there's very often it's a linkage altogether. So what we really try to encourage is, like, to think twice if it's the right time and the right methodologies are used to work on rangeland restoration. A second big lesson is, like, that actually to restore a grazing area, as here in the rangelands of northern Tanzania, there's actually really a no grazing policy needed. So the area needs time to rest. And I think that's also a very big challenge to, like, provide or to make it possible that, like, a specific area is, like, set aside, not grazed for at least a time of 2 to 3 years. And actually that would help a lot of rangelands to recover its natural health. And a last lesson I would like to share with you all, that grazing by wildlife is not the problem. Like, as I said before, a lot of rangelands here in northern Tanzania are communal rangelands where we have livestock, but it's also like wildlife corridors, so we also find a lot of wildlife in these areas. And the difference is that, like, if we have a group of zebras, antelopes, wildebeests, whatever is in the area found, naturally they will not spend as long time in the same area, and they also graze in have a different grazing behavior. They will never deplete the resource to its limits, because naturally they depend on, like, being able to come, return to the area and graze again. Where if we have, like, a group of 500 cattle, they graze from the beginning to the end. They don't leave a limit. And another big thing that we're observing is, like, the species actually, like, there's a trend in, like, increasing numbers of small livestock species, like goats and sheep, which also have very different grazing behavior to cattle, which is, like, also a big problem and that needs to be addressed in, like, rangeland management. So, for example, like the cattle which have, like, the big mouths, like, when they graze, they can't reach down to the roots. It's just physically not possible for them. So there will always be, like, a remaining, but goats especially, but also sheep, they graze to up down to the roots and removing everything from the ground, which actually cause much higher damage than purely cattle groups on the rangelands. And yeah, that's kind of, I'm reaching the end of my presentation, which might be a good time, and I'm really happy to answer any questions